Good evening. This is week 5, going into week 5, English 122 at Pikes Peak Community College. Tonight I'm going to try to be fairly quick compared to some of the lectures. I apologize for the length of them. I want to make sure you get the information you need to continue doing the good work that you've been doing. Your writing has been excellent. Your discussion posts have been excellent. So keep that good work up. We're finishing up Module 1, which is the recursive information. We have gone over basic writing, basic argument. We've gone over evaluation, analysis, description. We're going into the last mode of the Module 1, which is the critical analysis, rhetorical analysis. I've put up a specific video to detail that assignment. If you had any questions about it, I've put some more suggestions for text up underneath the supplemental readings tab, and the video for that should also be under the supplemental readings tab. If you have any questions about any of those assignments coming up, let me know. I also wanted to remind you that worksheet 2 goes hand in hand with that assignment, so that will be due as well this week. It's meant to serve as a template for your paper. Moving into week 5, we're starting to turn into the final, the gist of this course, which is the constructing a researched argument. A researched argument is one that is a topical argument or a critical analysis that's extended over the course of a conversation, bringing in several voices that you negotiate your position around, you defend your position by bringing in these guest voices, these sources, and then you position yourself around those voices. You can take a few different tactics with it. One is you can mediate a discussion at play between 2 or more authors or 2 or more reliable, credible sources about a topic, a problem that needs to be solved. For example, climate change would be a big one that you can undertake, and you can mediate voices and come up with your own argument that is defended through working through other people's arguments. Another way you can look at that mediation is you can look at how 2 different authors approach a subject. For example, in literature, if you wanted to look at how 2 authors might approach the concept of, for example, Christmas, and you could look at how Charles Dickens approaches the concept of Christmas and reformation of self through A Christmas Carol, and then you could look at another text that undertakes the values that are espoused in Christmas traditions in some way, and then negotiate a pattern between and decide that maybe one author is more poignant than another, more persuasive, more effective, so do an extended critical analysis. So I wanted to update you quickly. The think abouts have been updated for this week. The think abouts for this week are so what. The so what is an important element. It is the culmination of your argument. You're transitioning your argument to your reader. You're giving them a specific task. You're giving them responsibility for your argument. And then the other component part of think abouts this week is questioning. Questioning is the basis of your research. You want to find the answers to problems, so you have to ask questions. You have to pose questions that bear a lot of investigation. You want to refine those questions over and over to make sure that you start developing an argument, a thesis that is supportable, debatable, that is poignant, that has reason to keep inquiring about that topic. So think about questioning, and those are the 2 think abouts this week. This week we're also going to be going over synthesis and then constructing research argument. In English 121, you probably had synthesis as your final topic. It's when you join the conversation is the way a lot of people refer to synthesis. A synthesis is just looking at the relationship between ideas. So among 2 or more text, between 2 text or voices, and you join the conversation. So one way to join that conversation is you look at the trajectory of what has been said, and then you jump in. For example, if you're looking at the trajectory of the argument about climate change, you might want to start at where scientists started to notice how different elements in science reflected a potential from human impact in world climate. And then you might want to look at those pros and cons. You might want to look at various voices and try to bring together, if this is an argument created by media, or if it's by scientists, or if it's by politicians, and then synthesize your own path through there. You may not end up with a decision, but you may end up with a question that you then transfer to your reader in your so what. So a so what is going to be critical in a synthesis argument, or the constructing a researched argument. Researched argument is where you bring that research in to support your synthesis. So a synthesis argument, joining a conversation, you forge connections and look for what those connections might mean. For example, if I'm going to be looking at a critical argument, I'm trying to make a critical argument about culture. So I might look at things like, what is the connection between keeping up with the Kardashians as a representative of female body image in American culture in the 21st century? And you see how I've contextualized that information. And then say I bring in another element where I'm talking about say images in Vogue magazine, and I'm bringing those two texts in and looking at what they're saying about female body images, and then maybe bringing in another voice talking about personal experience about cutting because they're not comfortable with their body. Those are the kinds of things we're looking for, forging connections. So you look for a point of contact in forging connections. Another way, you can look at similarities and differences. Similarities across cultures or within a culture, or within histories, or within politics, or the big topical things. Similarities and differences that matter enough to argue about, to find research questions. So you might want to look at similarities and differences between foundational manifestos. So looking at the Declaration of Independence, and then maybe looking at another country's foundational documents and looking at those manifestos. What similarities? What are the major complaints that they have in common, and then looking at the differences where they diverge and what can be said about certain cultures based on those divergences or similarities, or what can be said as a whole about human need for structure and order within a political system. That kind of argument is what we're looking at. You can mediate between arguments. So you're saying X says this, Y says this, but I say something different. Or I can say X says this, Y says this, but X is more persuasive for these reasons, and so X bears more credibility. So we need to consider X's position more closely. You can look at mediating a conversation where you use outside text. So, for example, if you're going to look at African American voice in poetry as a representative of the culture. So, in the 1950s in Chicago, for example, when African American soldiers were returning from serving in World War II and they're coming back integrating into society, they're excluded from jobs and participating in, fully invested in the culture and the community. So they have to be excluded at the time they're included when it serves a purpose for the United States, but they're excluded when they're returning to fully join into the culture that they defended, or the society they defended. So you start seeing political tensions coming up through the cracks in poetry. You might want to look to voices, saying the voices in Chicago in the 1950s in poetry represented versus the voices in the Deep South in the same time frame, or across the world in time. So looking at perhaps African poetry from the 1990s, or the fall of the apartheid politics in South Africa. Are there commonalities, differences? Can you mediate the concept of exclusion and inclusion through the voice of poets? Those are the kinds of things we're looking at in a synthesis argument. You're bringing various points of view together, or various points together. And that leads to your own argument. So that's what a synthesis is. It's called joining the conversation. You've seen it a few ways. What you're doing is bringing two or more voices together, and then you're joining those voices and you're figuring out your path. So you're using them to position against or around or concur with your own argument in some way. So then that leads us to the next section. So we're looking at constructing a research argument, which is the big point of this English 122. Modules 2, 3, and 4 look at finding that topic and the project proposal abstract for Module 2. And then constructing an annotated bibliography with your research where you're saying these sources you're evaluating the sources that you found. And then you start writing the paper out. You integrate those sources in, you position your argument around and through using those sources, using questions to generate some more, double down for more research. So a research argument is a synthesis argument. You position your argument among others, like we just talked about. You use other arguments to support, refute, or turn your argument in some way. You create a conversation or a dialectic. A dialectic is a dialogue of sorts between multiple voices. It can be between two or more voices. So what you're doing is you're creating that dialectic with your audience. So you're bringing them into the conversation too through your voice, through your eyes. So the lens of your analysis or your understanding of a problem, you're negotiating, sorting through the sources that you are bringing in. You are controlling the question. So control and authority, like we talk about in writing. You are controlling that information and you are serving as the spokes lens for your audience to see the argument and positioning your voice as one you're trying to align your audience with. So you're trying to bring them aboard to get them to join the conversation with you among and between and around others. So the one way to get to a research argument is through research. And you're like, oh, for God's sake, Chris, really? And yes, what I'm saying is really because research is based on questioning. You need to figure out what you need to find. And we're going to be spending the next several weeks how we're going to find the things we need to find. So the first step is to just scouting amongst things. So even if you don't know a topic, just skim, read headlines, what interests you, what catches your eye, what needs to be thought about more clearly. Some of the topics that you've already written about for your basic argument, you can extend that into your research argument. That is not a problem. If you want to keep working on those documents or those texts, yes, absolutely. If you want to keep working through all those ideas, that's not a problem. So scouting for ideas, scouting for general voices, who are the authorities in the field? So really culling through, can I trust the National Enquirer or Us Weekly? Not that those are bad ways to read, but are those going to be your reliable sources who are authority figures? So you're going to start looking for scouting, who are the authorities in a field? So if you're going to be looking for climate change scientists, are you going to go into People magazine? Are you going to look for them? They might be able to find some of your sources for you, but a better way to get there quickly is to start looking through those databases for who are the scientists current in the field. Um, that's just an example for climate change. And then the second step to constructing a research argument is to start digging deep. By digging deep, I mean generating questions, coming up with answers for those questions, and then generating more questions based on the answers you find. So, for example, if I'm going to go back to that idea of the political manifesto, the Declaration of Independence, some of the questions that are generated when you read through that document are you're looking at who is the author of that document. Yes, it is the 13 colonies, the representative legislative body that they are trying to come up with to push back against England and say, no, we are independent now. But they choose Thomas Jefferson to be their author to speak for them, those colonials who signed the Declaration. But thinking about Thomas Jefferson, does he have any kind of exterior motives and external reasons to tuck other things inside the documents? That's where your critical analytic skills come in. What's really going on? Is there anything that can be doubt head. And so one of the things I might want to think about is, who is this Thomas Jefferson? So that might be a series of inquiry that I go through. In addition to, who else is involved? Might I look at some of the signers from Georgia who are very different regionally from those who are up in Delaware? Do they have different economic goals and needs? Are they being met by this one representative voice? Why did they choose Thomas Jefferson? And does he have an agenda as well? So thinking about those kind of things, that generates more questions. Other things I might want to generate ways to think about are, what exactly do I mean by a manifesto? What is a political document? What other kinds of revolutions have been worldwide and through history? Can I find any similar documents, or is this a unique document, and why? So again, the whys, the whys, the whys. Who, what, where, why? What is going into completing this document? And why is it so important to America that we defend it so mightily, and that we feel like we need to revolt to create this independence? What do we mean by independence? So remember, there's a phrase in there, the pursuit of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. What is the pursuit of happiness? Thinking about that, if you ask an attorney, a civil attorney specifically, or a constitutional scholar, that's a problematic phrase. What does it mean? What does happiness mean to you versus someone who's on the other side of the world in another place and time? It's an ephemeral, it's slippery. So are there any other documents throughout the world that are created that have that kind of slipperiness of language? Those are the questions that you kind of start digging deep. That's what we mean. So questioning, doubling down on the questions. The last little component part I'm going to say for tonight, and then we'll finish up for this night's lecture. And I wanted to also tell you I'll be posting throughout the week. I'll continue up with the conversation and the synthesis. I haven't gotten those texts written and composed for tonight. But I wanted to let you know about, they call it the following the footnote trails in academic and scholarship. Academics often will, you'll hear your professors harp on this, the citations, the footnotes, the bibliography, the works cited, however you want to note that information. The reason why we note it is not just to show, hey, it's not my own work, this is someone else's voice, but it's also as an acknowledgement to other scholars. I'm going to show you the path I took by using these reference points so that you can use them too. So for example, if I'm reading a text and I'm interested in pursuing that Declaration of Independence vote, and I'm really interested in, does Thomas Jefferson have any economic stake in becoming independent from an alliance with Great Britain? If he is really has some kind of economic um, external motive and he tucks it into that document, I want to start researching the economic situation of Thomas Jefferson and his trade. He's an importer. And so I want, what is he importing? Where is he doing business? Who are his clients? Why does he need to have open waters that are free from taxation? So you want to look at, does he have an exterior motive in some way for that? How am I going to find that? Well, if I start going through other authors and looking at their footnotes or their works cited or their bibliography, those kind of things will show me somebody else's path. So I can save time in my own research and I don't have to spend a bundle of extra time. So footnote trails are shortcuts that we give each other as scholars to help other scholars get to and sort through our information. So you'll see in the annotated bibliography, especially, you will find footnote trails to be so essentially helpful to you in saving time and helping you hone in and answer questions, because other scholars have been there and have paved a path. So take advantage of the time saving that that path generates for you. So in terms of time saving, I'm sorry that I'm still longer than I want to be. I try to come in under 15 minutes, and I haven't done that yet. I'm trying, but let me know if you have any questions. I'm really happy to hear from you. I'm happy to help you with any questions you have, any points that need clarification. If you are stumbling along, like I don't know what I'm doing here, touch base with me. No worries. I will be in touch with you again. I'll get those information posted for synthesis and constructing an academic argument. I'll get those PowerPoints up this week. And let me know if you have any questions. And good luck. You guys are doing a great job. I look forward to reading your next papers.